Welcome to the Daily Allegory through astrological divination. Today's story is about a reckless young woman desperate to keep her status in an exclusive society after stealing from her own circle. Spirals into a spree of impulsive crimes, each one committed less out of strategy than sheer panic and pride. When the heat starts closing in, she makes a colder, more calculated move. She frames a man she knows is a high asset value, planting evidence to pin her crimes on him while she positions herself to vanish with his trust fund, liquid assets, and a web of fraudulent life insurance policies she and a few co-conspirators have taken out on his life. For a while, the lie holds, until the society's most elite figure and A++ status kingmaker, with reputation for precision and control, catches the faintest scent of inconsistency. He quietly hires a team to investigate, expecting a small betrayal, and finds instead a predator hiding behind charm. What they uncover ignites him into a furious resolve and hands him the perfect leverage to partner with the very man the world has been trained to hate, turning scapegoat into strategist. Together, they set a counter game, meticulous, patient, and personal, redirecting every snare she built for others back onto her, until her own trap snaps shut and she's left stranded, exposed, outmaneuvered, and finally forced to face the ruin she tried to run from. Today's story is called the Stellium Ledger. The first lie was small enough to fit under a fingernail. An accidental miscount, a misplaced receipt, a laugh that arrived half a second too late. In the society, timing was currency. So was secrecy. People here didn't introduce themselves, they appraised. Rank was spoken in letters and symbols, and the highest tier, being A++, was treated like weather, inevitable, untouchable, and capable of ruining a season with a single shift. She had entered the circle the way a moth enters a chandelier, blinded by shine, certain that she belonged in the light. Her chart was a private hymn she recited whenever her hands trembled. Venus, Sun, Mars, and Mercury, all stacked in Capricorn. A single mountain range of ambition, love as leverage, selfhood as a contract, desire as momentum, words as tools. It made her feel designed for the society's rules. Climb quietly, take only what can't be traced, and never show hunger. But hunger was all she had. The theft wasn't even a plan at first. It was an impulse dressed in reason. A moment of, I deserve this, that quickly became, I need this, and then terrifyingly fast, I can't stop. One stolen item became a missing account balance, which became a panicked cover story, which became a chain of crimes that felt less like choices and more like reflexes. Each time she promised herself she'd slow down, her Capricorn stellium answered with a cold practicality. Fix it, control it, and outwork it. Except control is a costume, and she was already ripping seams. The group's resources were communal in the way sharks share water. There were gifts, loans, introductions, everything lubricated by favors and silence. She skimmed from what no one owned, the way everyone did in small, sanctioned ways. But hers wasn't sanctioned. Hers was need. She took too much, too quickly. She left behind the faint hot heat of desperation, and the society could smell desperation like it was blood. So when suspicion began to circle, she did what Capricorn does best. She chose a scapegoat with the cleanest shoes. He was known inside the world as a kind of necessary nuisance, if you will. High asset, high profile, shielded by family money, and a trust that moved like a glacier. Outside, he was problematic, unpleasant, and unlucky. Inside, he was convenient to dislike. The society had turned him into a story long before she ever touched him. It made him perfect. A man like that didn't need to be guilty to be buried. He only needed to be believable. She began laying the suggestion of him into the air. A comment here, a raised eyebrow there, a vague hint that she'd seen something she shouldn't have seen. Nothing concrete, though. Capricorn doesn't swing a hammer until the nail is already in place. The society prized subtlety. Suspicion was an art form. and she was a fast learner. Her co-conspirators weren't masterminds so much as mirrors, though. A few people she'd helped before. A few who owed her, if you will. A few who saw her climbing and decided to cling to her ankles like Lucky Charms. Together, they formed a quiet, parasitic constellation around a man's life. Papers signed, promises made, policies discussed in hushed tones that felt like prayers to money. She told herself it was survival. She told herself that he'd never notice. Men like him were insulated, surrounded by handlers and attorneys and a family legacy thick enough to suffocate. That was the lie that kept her warm, though. He won't feel it. But the world was shifting, and she could feel it under her skin like an approaching storm. The society's calendar was not measured in months, but in transits. They watched their charts the way generals watch maps. In that season, one aspect specifically was whispered like a warning bell. Jupiter-square-Chiron, growth scraping against an old wound, luck grinding against pain until something breaks open. The elders said it was a time when hidden harm swelled into view, when the thing you thought you'd escaped turned around and called you by your real name. She mocked it openly. She laughed. She said she didn't believe in superstition. Then she checked her own chart at 3 a.m. with shaking hands. Her Capricorn stellium looked like a row of clenched teeth. And hovering over everything was the heavy fogged imprint of something bigger than her own ambition. North Node, Saturn, and Neptune clustered into Pisces. Fate, consequence, illusion, all braided together. Pisces didn't punish directly. Pisces drowned. It blurred the edges until you couldn't tell where you ended and the lie began. In the society, A++ status was rarer than mercy. The top-tier member wasn't simply wealthy. He was architectural. He built reputations. He dismantled them. He could make people disappear without moving his hands. His emotional life was rumored to be non-existent, as if the price of A++ was your human softness. That's why the first sign of his interest felt like a rupture in reality. It began with a question, quiet, almost gentle, asked in a room where no one ever asked questions unless they already knew the answer. "Is anyone certain?" The A++ member said, eyes unfocused like he was listening to music only he could hear. "That this story is complete?" The way he said complete made her throat go tight. She smiled anyways because she had practiced smiling through panic until it felt like a skill. "Of course," she said, and the lie left her mouth with polished ease. But the A++ didn't nod. He simply looked at her, past her, through her. And for the briefest moment, she felt as if he could see her Capricorn planets stacked like stolen bricks inside of her ribs. That night, she dreamt of water rising in her apartment, filling the rooms without spilling. She stood in it up to her waist, clenching a folder of documents like a life raft, while unseen voices recited her mistakes with the calm of accountants. When she woke, her phone had no new messages. And still she knew the net had begun to tighten. The A++ member didn't confront. He commissioned. He hired a team the way a surgeon hires instruments, quiet professionals whose loyalty belonged to him and him alone. They didn't wear uniforms. They wore normalcy as a uniform. Their job wasn't simply to find evidence. It was to find the shape of a lie and press it until it confessed. They started with the society's ledgers, with social patterns, with inconsistencies so tiny they could be dismissed by anyone who wanted to keep believing. They followed the emotional physics of events. Who benefited? Who panicked? Who suddenly becomes helpful? Capricorn makes you think you can outwork consequences, but Pisces ensures consequences can wait you out. Weeks passed. She kept moving, kept improvising. New excuses, new distractions, new little crimes to patch the holes left by the last ones. Her mind became a frantic machine. Constant calculations, rehearsed innocence, paranoia disguised as caution. She began to interpret everything as a threat. A glance, a pause, a delayed reply. Her Mercury in Capricorn turned every conversation into a chessboard. Her Mars in Capricorn made her cruel when cornered. Her Venus in Capricorn made affection transactional. She could feel herself using people while telling herself it was mutual. Then came the first real crack. The hated man didn't break. She had expected him to disappear into legal damage control, to go to the woods and die, to retreat behind money, to react the way guilty people react, hiding, deflecting, bargaining. Instead, he did something that felt offensively calm. He watched. He let the accusation swell like a bruise and didn't flinch. That unsettled her more than rage would have. The A++ member uncovered what she hadn't considered. Her impulsivity left a pattern, like dots, waiting to be connected. Each crime had the same fingerprint: panic, speed, overcorrection. The team found contradictions that didn't belong to the man she was framing, but fit her like a second skin. It's like digital footprints. You can trace them no matter how hard you scrub or use a VoIP or VPN or proxy or geofence. It wasn't the details that damaged her. It was the rhythm. It was the psychology. Because every criminal has a psychological pattern, even if they're unaware of it. When the A++ finally saw the full mosaic, money siphoned, reputations nudged, policies whispered into existence, a man set up like a sacrificial altar, he didn't react like a judge. He reacted like an owner discovering rot in his foundation. What he also discovered is this man they had been attacking this entire time had been his very own blood, switched at birth on purpose by a careless nurse who needed a quick fix. His rage was quiet at first, a stillness so complete it made the room feel airless. Then it snapped into motion, orders given in clipped tones, calls made, doors closing, and in the shadow of that rage, something stranger happened. The A++ member reached out to the hated man, not with an apology, not with kindness, with an offer. The hated man arrived alone. He didn't posture, didn't beg. His eyes looked tired in the way people look when they've been blamed for so long they've developed immunity to shame. You don't like me, the hated man said. I don't need to, the A++ member replied. I need you alive, and I need her contained. The collaboration that followed wasn't fueled by friendship. It was fueled by mutual utility and something deeper, almost mythic, that the society would have called a transit itself. Jupiter in Cancer, the planet of expansion moving through the sign of home, protection, and the private self. In the society's language, Jupiter in Cancer was a sheltering force, a fortress built out of instinct and memory. It was the energy of closing ranks around what must be protected, and for the first time, the hated man was being treated as something worth protecting. Not because of innocence, not because of goodness, but because he had become the center of a moral energy the society couldn't ignore without breaking its own illusion of order. That's what her Pisces stellium had always threatened. Illusion collapsing into consequence. And oh, however it does. The trap they built for her wasn't loud. It didn't need guns or masks or dramatic confrontations. It needed one thing: her own nature. They created an opportunity so perfectly tailored to her Capricorn stack that it felt like fate. A chance to fix everything with one final move. A loophole. A door left unlocked. A rumor of a transfer. A misfiled asset. A window of time where she could take what she had planned to take and disappear into a new identity like a snake into tall grass. She told herself it was luck, but Jupiter-square-Chiron doesn't do luck. It does lessons. And the plan unfolded. She felt euphoric, relief rushing through her like heat. She imagined the man ruined, the society soothed, and her co-conspirators paid off and silenced. She pictured herself somewhere far away with ocean air, no mirrors, surrounded by expensive quiet. Like in a Puerto Rican retreat, if you will. Then the inconsistencies began. A text thread that didn't match her memory. A bank notification that arrived too clean, too simple. A friend who suddenly seemed scripted. The same phrases repeated by two different people on two different days. tiny things. But she lived in tiny things now. Tiny things where danger hid. And oh, how danger hides in tiny things. Her mind did what Neptune and Pisces does when threatened. It began to blur reality. She couldn't tell if she was noticing patterns or inventing them. She couldn't tell if the world was conspiring against her or if she was finally losing the thread of her own story. She started drinking too much water as if hydration could keep her from drowning in paranoia. She started hearing the society's whispers in normal sounds now. The elevator cable, the HVAC hum, the distant rush of traffic. She stared at her reflection and tried to see guilt on her face like a stain. The night she decided to run, rain fell hard enough to make the city feel underwater. She moved quickly. Capricorn again. Always Capricorn. Always the belief that speed equals salvation. But the final door didn't open. Not locked. Not jammed. Simply wrong. The handle felt unfamiliar, as if the architecture had been replaced. Her stomach dropped with a sick certainty somebody had rebuilt her world while she was still inside of it. Her phone vibrated. A single message. No name attached. Only a symbol the society used for the North Node, destiny, the direction you can't avoid. Then a second message, a time, a location. She really should have just ignored it. She should have vanished into the rain. Instead, her sun in Capricorn, pride and identity, the terror of being seen as small, drove her towards the meeting like a magnet towards iron. Planetarily speaking, she couldn't help herself. She needed to know who knew. She needed to control the narrative. She needed to be the one holding the wheel, even as the current pulled. The location was a private room in an old building by the water. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and salt. The A++ guy sat in the farthest chair, still as an obituary. The hated man stood near the window, the city's wet lights behind him like a distorted halo. The investigation team was nowhere visible, and that absence made the room feel even more dangerous. She tried to speak first. She tried to smile. She tried to be charming. No one responded. The A++ placed a folder on the table. It wasn't thick. It didn't need to be. He slid it towards her. "Tell me," he said quietly, "which part of you thought we wouldn't see?" Her throat tightened. Her hands hovered above the folder like it might bite. Inside were pages, summaries, timelines, cleanly organized connections that made her chest feel compressed. Not every detail, not every secret, but enough. Enough to prove she wasn't steering the storm. She was the storm. Her co-conspirators weren't mentioned by name. The A++ didn't need to. The implication was a leash. I can reach them. I can reach anyone. She swallowed. You don't understand. The hated man laughed once. Not amusement. Sound like a bone cracking. You picked me, he said, voice low, because everybody already wanted to believe I was a monster, right? She tried to meet his eyes and couldn't. Suddenly she felt what Jupiter and Cancer was doing in that room. It was not protecting her. It was protecting the house that she had tried to burn down from the inside. The A++ leaned forward slightly. You stole from the group, he said. You used the group. You turned the group into a shield for yourself. And when you feared exposure, you attempted to bury a man under your mess. His calm was worse than shouting. It felt like a sentencing being read. She reached for excuses, but Neptune and Pisces dissolved them in her mouth. Every justification tasted like seawater. The A++ continued. You set traps. You laid nets. You relied on everyone's desire to keep your story simple. He paused. Now, he said, we're going to do the same. And then only then, she understood the cruelty of the counter trap that had been already in play. They weren't going to destroy her with violence. This was an intellectual sparring game. They were going to destroy her with her own methods. With narratives, with exposure, with carefully timed consequences that made it impossible for anyone to defend her without implicating themselves. They were going to let her fall into the story that she built for other people. The hated man stepped forward. "You wanted me isolated?" he said. "You wanted me hated? You wanted me too busy drowning to notice who pushed me?" He glanced at the rain-streaked window. "You succeeded. Until you didn't." The room tilted just slightly, like a boat shifting underfoot. She felt suddenly nauseous, as if the water outside had found its way into her blood. She did what she always did when cornered. She tried to bargain. But Saturn in Pisces doesn't bargain. Saturn collects. Every time. The A++ stood. "You got two choices," he said, and his voice held the weight of a door closing. "You can confess in a way that spares the society from being public spectacles, or you can refuse, and we will let the world handle you without our mercy. Either way, your nets are now yours." She stared at the folder as if it were a mirror. Her mind flashed into past months, every impulsive decision, every stolen breath, every crime done in panic of saving face. She saw the pattern the way the investigators must have. A Capricorn engine strapped to a Pisces fog machine. Ambition powering illusion until it became lethal. And beneath it, the aspect she tried to laugh off. Jupiter-square-Chiron. The expansion of her consequences colliding with her oldest wound. The one she had never admitted out loud. "I am nothing without this status. If they see me, they will leave me." Should have picked a different path. Now they all see you. And leaving was the gentlest thing that these people could have done to her. Outside, the rain hammered the water into ripples that looked like fingerprints. She felt a strange, humiliating clarity. She had built her escape route out of other people's trust. And trust, once broken, turns into a current. It pulls. And it drags. Her voice came out thin. "If I go down," she whispered, "I could take others with me." The A++ smiled without warmth. "You already tried that." He nodded towards the hated man, a gesture that felt like a verdict. "You wanted him buried," the A++ said. "Instead, you handed him the shovel." The hated man didn't look triumphant. He looked tired. Like somebody finally setting down a weight that he had carried for years. That was the final horror. There would be no dramatic villain monologue. No cathartic scream. Just consequences arriving on schedule, delivered by people who understood her better than she understood herself. In the weeks that followed, the society didn't publicly implode. It quietly severed her like a limb infected past saving. Her co-conspirators turned on her with rehearsed shock, claiming ignorance with the sincerity of actors. The narrative was shaped carefully. She became the lone aberration, the moral stain removed to preserve the illusion of order. And yet, behind closed doors, the truth was harsher than any headline could ever portray it. She had been outplayed, not by luck or brilliance, but by her own psychological blueprint, by somebody who learned 10 times faster than her. She had relied on the society's appetite for simple villains, and the society had used the same appetite to make her the villain instead. On the day the final evidence surfaced, the last trap tightening, she found herself by the water again, watching the current race beneath the bridge. The phrase she'd heard as a joke returned, with the weight of a prophecy. "Up Schitt's Creek without a paddle." Jupiter in Cancer swelled the water, made it look endless. North Node in Pisces made it feel inevitable. Saturn in Pisces made it final. Neptune in Pisces made it surreal, like she was watching someone else's life collapse. And Chiron, old wound, exposed, throbbed with a single simple truth. She hadn't been trying to get away with crimes. She'd been trying to outrun being seen. But the moment she tried to bury somebody else under her shadow, the shadow became her only home. And homes, like oceans, don't care how important you thought you were. They only care whether you can swim. And she couldn't. not anymore anyways. I'm gonna end it right there for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it.